Hey everyone, it's Austin Solomon, the Solomon Group at Coldwell Banker Action, doing a quick episode of the Real Wausau Real Estate Show. Today we got Dustin Vreeland back in the studio for a quick episode. We were just chatting a little bit about surveying and the process. And if you're selling a property and you know, I've certainly had this happen where a seller's like, hey Austin, you know what, that neighbor, their fence is on my property. What do we do? And as a seller, right, one of the things that you're required to do if you're selling a residential property is to disclose the nature of the property to the prospective buyer via a real estate condition report. And one of the questions on there, are you aware of any lot line disputes, encroachments, etc.? So you would have to disclose that to a buyer, right? And a buyer may be concerned about that. But Dustin, tell us a little bit about, let's say that, let's take that example that, hey, the neighbor, their fence comes onto my property a few feet. Where do you come into that? How can you help solve that problem?
So what we could do is we can come survey your existing lot, see what you have, see how far the fence is actually off.
Yep.
And then from there, once we know exactly where the fence is and if it's on your property, we can give you guidance on what to do with that. Best thing to do is usually just talk to your neighbor and see, hey, can we work this out so that we can get your fence on your property? Do you want to purchase this, or I'm going to ask you to move it before I sell it?
Yeah. Can they? Oh, that's a good question. First off, have you ever had, you get the phone call, you're like, hey, my neighbor's fence is on my property, and then you go out there and then you find out, no, it's actually not. Like,
yeah, we have. It had that happen just recently, and they thought the fence, they're like, yeah, this fence is on my property, and there's a whole 500 feet of fencing along there, and they're like, yeah, this is on my property. I know it is. And we got out there, and it wasn't.
Nice.
It was on their property. It got tight to the line,
yep,
right up on it, but it never actually crossed the line, and it worked out nicely for both sides.
Right.
But there are times where you run into a fence where it's not.
So that's perfect. So first thing to do is to have a surveyor come out and verify, hey, what are we actually working with?
Yep.
And then from there, like you say, there's options where if maybe the neighbor would be interested in buying, that might be one option, right? Versus taking down the fence.
Right.
Maybe the neighbor could buy a sliver, and that's where you come in.
Right, and that's where once we know exactly what you're looking at, you guys can, what we always recommend is talk to your neighbor and just try to work it out. Try and work it out the best way you can, be neighborly to each other, and just try and figure this out together. Right,
because what that might look like, and actually, Dustin's dad, Tim, had one time, I was selling a property, and there was a portion of the driveway. So the seller, a portion of their driveway was on the neighboring property, and it was a tense situation. The buyers of the house were selling their home, and there was just a lot going on. And so, amazingly, your dad was able to work with the neighbor, and what they did is they had they worked it out so that sliver was like 4 feet. The lot line was moved over 4 feet. The seller of the property purchased it from the neighbor. Or maybe the neighbor had quit claimed it over,
right,
to the seller, and then that avoided the encroachment, and we were able to close it. It happened in like 10 days. I remember it was like, I was so relieved. It was I thought we were going to have major delays, but your dad pulled it off. It was amazing.
Yeah, you can get it. We can get it done quick as long as the two neighbors can get along, and you guys can just get the encroachments settled right away. The process can move quickly. So
be neighborly, try to work it out. One of the things we were talking about is sometimes if an attorney gets involved, then it can get a little bit difficult, right?
Right, yeah, because now you're going to court over it, and I don't know about you, but I've never met anybody that all of a sudden you took them to court and they're friends after the fact. So
right, and then it gets pricey too.
Right, all you're going to do is spend more money when you could have probably spent that money purchasing that little bit of sliver of land where the encroachment is happening.
Right,
for less than that price of that lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. So if you can work it out with your neighbors, that's the best thing. I guess if one person is very is very difficult to work with, at that point it might not be a bad idea.
Right, then you might have to seek legal advice on that end after that.
Right, okay. No, that's great. So that's one thing, is if you're selling a property and you know that, hey, that's a thing, it might be good to bring that up to the neighbor beforehand, and maybe if it's not like a whole, if it's just a small portion of fence, maybe it's something that could be moved, or if it's a shed, something that could be moved. those types of things.
Or like the driveway, where you could just make a little sliver. It doesn't even have to be the full length of the property. It could just be to where the driveway is, and we can make it makes a weird shape in the property, but at least then the driveway is all on your property and there's no encroachment there, or the new buyer is going to have to remove part of their driveway.
Right.
That type of situation.
Yep. Yeah. So that's one thing is, if you're thinking about selling, you want to eliminate the ifs, right? So eliminate the potential concerns for a buyer. That makes it a lot easier when you're selling a property to have addressed those things, so that the buyer doesn't have to try to figure all those things out when they're moving in.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Dustin, on this week's episode of The Reel. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for having me.